Arvid lived in a small, textured clay house at the edge of the woods. His shelves were filled with half-carved wooden birds and unfinished paintings. Arvid sighed, his clay shoulders drooping. "I try so hard," he whispered to the empty room. "But nothing I do ever seems to grow. I am a failure." He felt as heavy as a lump of unworked clay, stuck and motionless. Desperate for an answer, Arvid decided to seek out the wise hermit who lived in the deepest part of the forest. He packed a small bag and stepped out into the woods. The path was winding and thick with mossy clay stones. Arvid walked past tall trees and bright flowers, but he only saw his own shadow, trailing behind him like a reminder of his mistakes. After hours of walking, Arvid reached a clearing where a tiny hut sat nestled inside the roots of a giant tree. Sitting on a flat stone was Elder Solen. The hermit's hair was like swirls of white wool, and his eyes were as bright as polished beads. Arvid approached him slowly. "Elder," Arvid said, "I have worked for years, but I have nothing to show for it. Why have I failed?" Elder Solen didn't answer right away. He stood up and beckoned Arvid to follow him to a small garden patch behind the hut. "Look closely, Arvid," the hermit said, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "I planted two things here at the exact same time, a fern and a Chinese bamboo tree. Watch what happened." Arvid leaned over to see. On one side of the patch, a magnificent fern spread its green fronds wide, catching the sunlight. It was lush and beautiful, filling its corner of the garden with life. "The fern grew quickly," Solen explained. "In just a few months, it rose from the soil to become what you see now." It was a success almost instantly. Arvid nodded, feeling a twinge of envy. Then, Solen pointed to the other side of the garden. There was nothing there but a tiny, pale green shoot, barely an inch tall. "But what about the bamboo?" Arvid asked. "It's barely there." "Did it die?" Solen shook his head. "For 5 years, Arvid, that bamboo stayed exactly like that. It didn't grow an inch above the ground while the fern grew taller every day." Arvid looked from the tiny sprout to the giant fern. "5 years?" he asked. "Why would you keep watering something that didn't grow for 5 years?" "That sounds like a failure to me." Solen chuckled, a sound like clicking clay marbles. "Because I knew what was happening where no one could see. The bamboo wasn't being lazy. It was busy." Solen knelt down and patted the earth. While the fern was busy showing off its leaves, the bamboo was growing its roots. It sent them deep into the earth, wider and stronger every day. It was building a foundation that could support something massive. If it had grown tall before its roots were ready, it would have toppled over in the first breeze. Suddenly, Solen stood up and gestured to a massive bamboo stalk that towered over the hut, its top lost in the clouds. Then, in the 5th year, it shot up. It grew 100 feet in just 6 weeks. But tell me, Arvid, did it grow 100 feet in 6 weeks? Or did it take 5 years and 6 weeks? Arvid stared at the giant tree, his eyes wide. "It took 5 years," Arvid whispered. "The growth was happening the whole time." Solen placed a hand on Arvid's shoulder. "All the time you spent working, Arvid, you were growing your roots. Do not be discouraged because you don't see leaves yet. Your foundation is getting stronger. When you are ready, you will rise just as high." Arvid smiled, feeling a lightness in his clay heart. He wasn't a failure. He was just growing his roots.